The price of success. It had taken years, but Adrian Crowley was finally where he always wanted to be, at the pinnacle of success. His startup, InnovaTech, had exploded into one of the world's leading tech companies, revolutionizing the way people interacted with technology. He had everything: money, power, fame. He was the youngest billionaire on the planet, a visionary, a genius. But even as he stood in front of his sleek glass office overlooking the city, a gnawing emptiness settled in the pit of his stomach. For years, he had worked tirelessly, sacrificing relationships, time, and even his own health to get here. He had built something incredible, but at what cost? The view from his penthouse, with the endless spread of city lights below, no longer gave him the sense of triumph it once had. It felt more like a gilded cage, a monument to all the things he had given up in his unrelenting pursuit of success. Adrian had been the prodigy in the tech world, the young man who defied every expectation and turned his vision into a multi-billion-dollar empire. But as the years passed, the pressure had started to mount. The late nights, the endless meetings, the constant need to innovate, it had all started to wear on him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd taken a real vacation or had dinner with friends who weren't just business associates. The joy that once came from creation had become a blur of deadlines and high-stakes deals. His assistant, Sophie, knocked lightly on the door before entering. She was in her mid-20s, sharp, efficient, and had been with him since the early days. "The board's ready for you," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of concern. Adrian had been distant for weeks now, more focused on numbers and meetings than anything else. "Thanks," he replied, not looking up. "Tell them I'll be there in 5. Sophie hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "Adrian, are you okay? You don't look like yourself. You haven't been yourself for months." He gave her a tight smile. "Just tired, Sophie. I'll be fine." But Sophie wasn't convinced. She had seen the way Adrian's eyes had become hollow, the way his once infectious passion had dimmed. She knew him too well to ignore it. There was something wrong, something he wasn't telling anyone. After the board meeting, Adrian returned to his penthouse, a space that should have felt like a sanctuary, but instead felt like a prison. The city lights twinkled below, but they didn't bring him comfort anymore. He sank into the leather chair, staring at his phone, flicking through the hundreds of congratulatory messages and offers of collaboration. All of it felt empty. It was then that he noticed something, a new message. It wasn't from anyone he recognized, just a string of random numbers and letters in the subject line. Curiosity gnawed at him. He opened it. "The price of success is higher than you think. Come alone. Midnight. The penthouse, 47th floor." Adrian's heart skipped a beat. He stared at the message, confused. Who was this? Was it some kind of joke? A threat? But the part about the 47th floor, it struck him as eerily specific. That was the floor where he had first secured the deal that had catapulted InnovaTech to its current success. A chill ran down his spine. It's nothing, he thought. Just a prank. But as midnight approached, something in the back of his mind urged him to go. Maybe it was the same drive that had gotten him this far. The need to conquer, to know, to be ahead of everyone else. Maybe he needed to prove something to himself. He changed into a black suit and left his penthouse, heading for the elevator. As the doors closed, his mind raced. Was this someone from his past? A competitor trying to sabotage him? Or something worse? The elevator dinged, and the doors opened to the 47th floor. It was silent, dark. The floor was vacant. The lights dimmed to an eerie glow. Adrian stepped off the elevator. The soft hum of the building's ventilation system, the only sound in the otherwise still air. He looked around, but there was no sign of anyone. The floor seemed strangely empty, almost like it hadn't been touched in years. The high-tech office space he had envisioned when he first bought the building now felt abandoned, cold and hollow. His steps echoed as he moved deeper into the floor, his shoes clicking on the polished marble. The air felt heavier here, thicker, as though it was holding something back. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, tall, dressed in a dark suit. His face was obscured by the dim lighting, but Adrian felt an inexplicable pull, as if the man's presence was familiar in some distant, unsettling way. "You came?" the man said, his voice low but clear. "I was wondering if you would." Adrian's mind raced, trying to place the voice, but it was like trying to catch smoke with his bare hands. Something about the man felt wrong. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. "Who are you?" Adrian demanded, his voice steady but edged with fear. "What do you want?" The man stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with a sharp intensity. "You've made it, haven't you? The youngest billionaire in the world. You've built something extraordinary. But success has a price." Adrian frowned. "This is crazy. I'm not here for riddles. Just tell me what this is about." The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only a cold, calculating emptiness. "The price of success is more than just time, Adrian. It's your soul, your essence. You think you've reached the peak, but in truth, you've only begun to climb." Adrian's pulse quickened. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man's smile widened, and in a voice that seemed to echo from everywhere, he said, "You've already paid the price. All of it. Your relationships, your health, your peace. Everything you gave up to be great. Do you think you're in control?" Adrian's breath caught in his throat. The air around him grew thick, and suddenly, the walls seemed to close in. The floor beneath him began to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, like the beating of a heart. The man's eyes seemed to flicker with an otherworldly glow, and Adrian felt his legs weaken. The man's voice, low and chilling, whispered, "The price of your success is more than just the people you've left behind. It's what you become. You've created a version of yourself that can never be destroyed, never be free." Adrian stumbled backward. "No, this is insane." The man stepped into the light, and Adrian gasped. The man's face was not unfamiliar at all. It was a younger version of himself, his own reflection twisted into something darker. His eyes were cold, empty, devoid of the idealism Adrian had once carried. "I'm the part of you that you buried," the man said, his voice as smooth as velvet, but carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. "The part you sold to reach the top. I'm what's left when you've given everything for success." Adrian stumbled back, his mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. But as he looked at the figure, the version of himself, he realized the truth. All the sacrifices, all the choices he had made had created something inside of him, something darker, something that had taken on a life of its own. The drive that had once propelled him forward had transformed into a monster, a reflection of his ambition and his obsession. I didn't know," Adrian whispered, his voice cracking. The man, his darker self, smiled again, the grin widening until it seemed to stretch across his face. "You didn't know because you never stopped to look. You were too focused on the prize to notice what you were becoming. But now, you'll never be able to forget." The room spun, and Adrian felt the walls closing in on him, suffocating him. He gasped for air, but it was as though the very oxygen had been drained from the room. The price of success, he realized too late, was not just everything he had given up. It was everything he had become, and there was no going back. Asterisk the next morning. Adrian Crowley's name was all over the news again. His company had hit a new milestone, breaking records and securing another round of funding. But something was different. In the middle of all the praise, no one had seen or heard from Adrian himself. His apartment was empty, his office locked. His phone remained silent. No one knew where he had gone. Asterisk. In his penthouse, a single message was left on his desk. It was not an email or a text, but a handwritten note in elegant but unsettlingly familiar handwriting. "You can't outrun yourself." The world moved on without Adrian Crowley. InnovaTech continued to flourish, but rumors began to swirl. Some whispered that Adrian had suffered a breakdown, while others speculated he had gone into hiding, overwhelmed by the weight of his success. No one could say for sure, but one thing was certain: Adrian Crowley had paid the ultimate price, and there was no way to undo it. Years later, the 47th floor of InnovaTech